Thank you very much for that, Brandon. There's a worksheet that Simon's done for the younger or CYC age. I think we've got everybody, Ben, that came through the door. Have we got many left over? Heaps left over. So, if you'd like to do a worksheet, there are heaps left over. If you'd like to keep yourself awake, you can do so by putting your hand up, and Ben will bring one round for you. So put your hand up high so Ben can see, and then we'll ask Brother Simon to come forward and speak to us on that we have a more sure word of prophecy. Thank you, Brother Simon.
Thank you, Brother Tim. And good afternoon, brothers and sisters and young people. We took our reading from the 2 Peter chapter 1, and we're focusing mainly on the last few verses there. But as Peter was delivering this message, we saw there, didn't we, that he was encouraging the people that he was writing to make this message part of their lives. And if you're going to make something part of your life, you need to have confidence in it. And that's the essence of the verses at the end there. And I've got them from a different version, just for the sake of making it absolutely clear. Peter says this in verse 16, "When we told you about the power and the return of our Lord Jesus Christ, we were not telling you clever stories that someone had made up, but with our own eyes we saw his true greatness. God, our great and wonderful Father, truly honoured him by saying, 'This is my own dear Son, and I am pleased with him.' We were there with Jesus on the holy mountain and heard this voice speak from heaven." And he goes on. All of this makes us even more certain that what the prophets said is true. So you should pay close attention to their message, as you would to a lamp shining in some dark place. You must keep on paying attention until daylight comes and the morning star arises in your hearts. But you need to realise that no one alone can understand any of the prophecies in the scriptures. The prophets did not think these things up on their own, but they were guided by the Spirit of God. And so we have to have confidence that the things that were prophesied were directly given by God, the message of God. And last Sunday afternoon we did actually refer to this in Deuteronomy, the importance of this, about knowing when a prophecy is of God. And we have it there from Deuteronomy. "And Yahweh said to me, they are right in what they have spoken. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not listen to my words, that he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, or speaks the name of other gods, that some prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, how may we know the word that Yahweh has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of Yahweh, if the word does not come to pass or come true, that is a word that Yahweh has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously, and you need not be afraid of him." And it's important for us to have a conviction that what the prophets have said has happened. And that's really the essence of this first session. We're going to have a look at things that have happened, prophecies that were spoken about, and they clearly have come to pass. And then the second session, we're going to have a look at probably more current events and how they might be fitting into prophecies. And so we're going to start off with a well-known prophecy. And those that have got the worksheets can answer this question, unless they're asleep. But if we were going to look to a prophecy that talked about the kingdoms of men, where do you think we might start? Quick, we haven't got a lot of time this afternoon. Daniel 2. Yeah, I was looking for a young person, but you'll do, Brian. That's good. All right, Daniel chapter 2. Let's quickly go over to Daniel chapter 2. It's one we are and should be fairly familiar with. It's one that we deal with at Sunday school. And we know that in Daniel chapter 2 we have recounted there a dream that was had by the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, and he had this dream of an image, didn't he? An image of a man. An image of a man. And this is important. This was a man. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of an image of a man. And the components, a head of gold, yeah, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, and then the legs, iron, and then the feet and toes. Right, okay. And they represent, the head of gold represents Babylon. All right, so we know this. How do we know that? Yeah, but how do we know that? Yeah, because the narrative tells us, and this is the beauty of the prophecy of Daniel. Most of the time we are told what the things mean. We don't have to be confused, all right? And so this was revealed in verse 37. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom power. And he gives him, recounts the message to him, and he says over the page at the end of verse 38, Thou art this head of gold, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, another third kingdom of brass. So we know it's all about kingdoms, no guesswork. All right, so the Medo-Persian Empire followed the Babylonian Empire, and the next empire, yeah, the Greek Empire. In these are approximate years here because they didn't just cut off and one start and another one finish. All right, they had one sort of diminished and another one took over, but there's sort of general time periods. Then that was followed by the Roman Empire, and then of course, that broke up and became part of divided Europe. Okay, so we have that. Now, what's important for us to just focus on here at the moment is that Daniel was given this vision right back here, given this message right back here in the Babylonian Empire, and it was unfolding over the next few thousand years. Okay, so he was delivered the interpretation to give to the king, and it unfolded over that period. Okay, so these are characteristics for each of these empires, and we have them there. And it's important just for us to note here that when the image is destroyed, and we're told about that in verse 44, and it says there, in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. And so it's talking about, isn't it, the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. And in verse 45 it says, For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, and the silver, and the gold, and the great God hath made known unto the king what shall come to pass hereafter. The dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. And we note there in that verse that all of these components are destroyed together. They are all destroyed together. And that's important for us to bear in mind, and we're going to come back to that later today. All right, so just remember that. Components, it's not just as though one finishes and another one starts. They do flow through, and we will see that. Okay, where do you reckon we would want to be in that image, in that vision? The stone. That's where we want to be, isn't it? We're living in the times of the toes, but we want to be in the stone, because that represents not just the Lord Jesus Christ, but the Lord Jesus Christ and the saints. Okay? So, there we go. Daniel chapter 2. and as I said, one that we should be familiar with. But it provides us a building stone, and we're now going to go over to Daniel chapter 7. Now in Daniel chapter 7, sorry, I've had that circled, there you go. Right, Daniel chapter 7, this is a vision, and we're told here in verse 1 that Daniel had. Daniel had a dream and the visions of his head upon his bed, and he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. And Daniel spake and said, I saw in my dream by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. What do you reckon the great sea might represent? Yeah, the nations, yeah, but maybe that Mediterranean, because that was the great sea in that region, wasn't it? Okay, because we need to remember all the time that all this focus is around Israel, and we're going to see that later on. So you'll see that all these empires sort of come out of that region, that area, okay? And we see that four beasts come up from the sea, diverse one from another. And as I think it was Sister Ruth said, yeah, so they came out of the nations from different areas, and we see them like beasts. And so this is interesting. This is what God saw about these empires. How many beasts were there? 4, wasn't there? There was 4 beasts. And they basically equate to these 4, and the fourth one is really all of that together. And we'll see that. Okay, so the first beast was like a lion. Okay, we've got the components there. It was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Okay, so this first beast does really associate with that Assyrian Babylonian empire, if you like a lion. And it was something that they used to represent their empire. That's at the gates of the Ishtar Gate. Okay, we see a lion on there. And this is an Assyrian representation. They're interesting that it's got wings there as well. All right, so it is a fitting symbol, the lion. And it had eagle's wings. And that really talks about the way that the empire did spread, and particularly in the Assyrian stage of it, the empire spread quite rapidly and quite quickly. Not so much under the Babylonian. The Babylonian stage of it was more a consolidation of the empire. And so that's really picked up in this idea of the wings being plucked up, because wings really are about moving quickly, aren't they? And it stands on its feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And so you can sort of see there's different aspects here. And the lion, its sense, talks about the Assyrian Empire, and that they were quite vicious in the way that they established control, and they would relocate people to other places and really mix things up. Whereas the Babylonian Empire was a little bit different. They actually looked, how can they make themselves better? And we see that in Daniel particularly, where they took the cream of the crop, as it were, and said, how can we benefit by these people that we are conquering? And they looked for the opportunities there. And we see this in the story of Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar learnt, didn't he, in Daniel chapter 4, the same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honoured him that liveth for ever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And so Nebuchadnezzar himself came to an understanding of who God was and where he fitted in the whole scheme of things. And of course, that's a quote we grab hold of, isn't it? And take hold of, that it is God that rules in the kingdoms of men. And we'll be impressed by that today. And so that's a fitting symbol, isn't it? And that's the Babylonian Empire. And so we're seeing that extra components are given to us that highlight things about these particular empires. The second example, or the second empire, is in verse 5, and it says there that the second was like to a bear. It raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, and between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise and devour much flesh. And so we have a bear to start with, and doing some research on this, I was given to understand that a characteristic of the Medo-Persian Empire was the way that they went about things was with great armies. They just were like a bear. They were just overwhelmed people just by their pure weight of numbers, like a lumbering bear as such. We see there also that it's emphasised there that it was raised up on one side. And we remember that the second empire was the Medo-Persian Empire. And so it started out under Cyrus the Mede, but then later came the greater, as it were, who was Darius and so on, and the Persian Empire took over. And so first of all it was sort of lower, and then we have following the upper side, and we're going to see that again in another example. And we're told that it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. Now, if a bear has ribs in its mouth, what do you think it's doing there? Is it being caring and loving about it, or? Yeah, dominion and power, isn't it? So it's sort of talking about that. And what's interesting is that here we have the Median Empire here, and to conquer the area that was to become theirs, they had to overcome the Babylonian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, and the Lydian Empire. Those 3 empires were the ones that they took over to become this Medo-Persian Empire. And so I have that there, those highlighted there. And so that's why on the sheet there you've got 3 lines to put next to the ribs there. All right? And just remember, this isn't a history lesson. We're trying to reinforce here that what the prophets have told us, that they did really happen. And because these things did happen, we can then start to have confidence when we start reading about prophecies today, that we can have confidence they're going to happen. All right? So that's the importance of just getting this. So we're not going to go into too much intricate detail, but we're just going to do enough so that we can have confidence ourselves. Okay, so that was the second beast. And then we have the third beast in verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And so when we think about a leopard, you know, what do we think about? What sort of beast is that? Is that speed, isn't it? Yeah, it's quite agile, isn't it? Quite an agile animal. And it's emphasised it had 4 wings on it. So we saw the first beast had 2 wings, which, you know, talks about maybe that the speed with which it was able to spread across the region. Well, this one has 4 wings. So we can see that it's probably highlighting the fact that it was quickly able to encompass a large area, and indeed it did. The Greek Empire started over here, and it was to spread right across over towards India. Okay, and it went right down here into Egypt as well. Incredibly quickly. Of course, Alexander the Great was the great leader under which all of this area was conquered. He started out at the age of 18 with his dad over in this area where they sort of conquered because Greece wasn't a country as such as we know it today. There was a lot of individual countries which had to be brought together, and they brought them together and then they went out. And it was predominantly Alexander that did that. And he died at the age of 33, very young. And he achieved all of that as a young man. And then following Alexander, there were 4 heads and dominion was given to it. So we're told that there was 4 heads on this. And it's well known that Alexander had 4 generals and the empire was divided up amongst these 4 generals: Cassander, Antigonus, Seleucus and Ptolemy. Okay, so we can see the way that things unfolded. And this was 300 or so years after Daniel had this vision, these details. And so it shows us the way that God revealed these things to him. Later on, the Greek Empire really consolidated and the Seleucid Empire became quite the major one in the north, and the Ptolemaic Empire the one in the south. Okay, they become a focus. And in the middle, of course, we have Israel, and that's important for us, and we're going to see that in a few moments. All right? So, then we have the 4th beast. We're not really told much about this beast. It's not one, it's just a beast. And the focus on this beast really is initially about the horns, isn't it? We're told that it's a dreadful and terrible. It's strong exceedingly. We're told it had great iron teeth. Iron teeth. So we can say, oh yeah, okay. I've heard that already, haven't I? This was the metal in the image that represented Rome. And it devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the others. Okay. Now I have forgotten to tell you that Daniel had the interpretation given to him again in verse 16 here, because he was troubled by it, and the angel stood by him and told him the interpretation. Verse 17, these great beasts which are 4 kings which shall arrive out of the earth. Okay, so once again we understand what this message is all about. And as the angel is revealing this to Daniel in verse 19, he said, I would have you know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron. We've already heard that. And it says its nails were of brass. Its nails were of brass. And it devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue of it. And so what does brass represent? Yeah, so we've already seen that the Grecian Empire was represented by brass, wasn't it? And so we see that in this particular beast, there's still that Grecian element there. And that's important. And it's still here today. Okay. And so that's the Roman Empire. And so the Roman Empire spread right across over into Britain, and it focused right across here in northern Africa. And so it took over most of what we would know as Europe today. And we see, don't we, in verse 8 of Daniel chapter 7, that Daniel considered the horns, that they were really the thing that was unusual about this beast. And there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Now, when we look at horns in Scripture, they do represent rulers or dominions, okay? And we see here there's 10 dominions as such, or 10 rulers that came out of this beast. But then there's this little image that we're told here where 3 of them sort of disappeared, and there was this little horn that came out, and it had eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. Okay. Now, what's interesting is in history that with the Roman Empire, as it started to, in that area, as it came to an end, there arose a man king by the name of Charlemagne, who was king of the Franks, which is we would know probably more as around that area of Germany. Once again, countries at that time, the borders were quite different to what we would know today. But probably around that sort of Germany area initially, okay? And he was king of the Franks from the year 768, king of the Lombards from 774, and emperor of what is now known as the Carolingian Empire from 800. So he overtook those 3 areas. That's interesting, isn't it? Because we have a little horn that took over the area of 3 other horns as such. Okay? He united most of Western and Central Europe and was the first recognised emperor to rule in the West after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, approximately 3 centuries earlier. And through his assumption of the imperial title, he is considered the forerunner to the line of the Holy Roman Emperors. Okay, so we're seeing now some quite detail, aren't we? That this person clearly is the foundation for what became known as the Holy Roman Emperors. And that's in the western area of the Roman Empire, which is Italy and Rome, because over in the east, there was the Eastern Roman Empire set up. Okay, does anyone know what city became the centre of that empire? Constantinople. Excellent. Constantinople. And who established it? Constantine. He was not vain at all. Okay, he named the city after himself and established it as the Eastern Empire. And that's why in the image that we saw at the start, there were 2 legs, the Eastern and the Western empires. Okay, and the Eastern leg really became that military strength. It became the strong part, and the Western part, it really suffered for a period until Charlemagne came along, and he really consolidated that area and re-established it as the holy centre, and it became part, as we said, of the Holy Roman Emperors. And that was the area that Charlemagne really established in that western area of Europe. Okay, so historically there's that foundation as a Holy Roman Emperor. And we remember that in this vision we were told that this horn had eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth that spoke great things. Now, it's not great things as in we would say today, oh, that's great. Okay, it's not that sense. It's things that are forceful. Okay? And 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3 and 4. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, all that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And that's the sense of the greatness that we're talking about here. Someone that thinks they're so great that they feel like they are God themselves. And we, of course, have the latter-day representation of that in the papal system, which was started with Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? All right. Turn the page to Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8, we have a couple more animals talked about here, once again in a vision. And here we see that the vision starts off in verse 3 with there was a ram which was by a river and had two horns. The two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. So we're starting to see repeats of things we've already heard, and we're told also that the ram was pushing westward, northward, southward, so no beast might stand before him. And then he was considering in verse 5, and a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. We say, well, what on earth is all this about? Well, once again, Daniel was told. Okay, from verse 19. He said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation at the time appointed. Verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So he knows that. Okay? And not only that, the rough goat is the king of Grecia. Okay, so the prophecy of Daniel is great, particularly for young people, because we get told all about it. Okay, and it's not really that hard. It's then, how do we see how it fits into history? Okay, so we know that first of all, this ram represents Medo-Persia, and that it had two horns, and one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. And we've already seen that, haven't we? That the Medo-Persian Empire, Cyrus the Mede came first, but the greater, the Persian Empire, starting with Darius, he came later. Okay? And that was the situation. And it was here we've seen that, how they spread their empire, and it went westward, northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. Okay? And we might remember, actually I haven't got the map here, but the Medo-Persian Empire really did move towards the west, because it was over in the eastern side, wasn't it? And it went westward, northward and southward from where it started from. And it did become great. And as he was considering, behold, a goat came from the west. And that was interesting, wasn't it? Because we remember Greece was over here and it headed westward. Okay, we can see that the detail here on the face of the whole earth, and touch not the ground. So that once again we've got the essence, the image of speed, haven't we? That empire. And it had a notable horn between his eyes. Okay, notable horn. What does the horn represent? Power. And who was the powerful one in Greece? Alexander the Great. He was the one, wasn't he? Okay, he established it. He established this empire, the notable horn. Okay? And he came to the ram, which was by the river, and the fury of his power saw him come close. The ram was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram and broke the two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. He cast him down to the ground, stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. That was the dominion of Alexander. And then we're told out of the goat waxed strong, and he was strong, and a great horn was broken, and for it came 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. 4 horns came out, and we know that, don't we, that there was the 4 generals that took over the empire after Alexander. And out of the one of them came forth a little horn which waxed exceeding great. And it was exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and towards the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Okay, so it was pretty vicious in the way that it had dominion. So we're told this little horn, and we're going to have a little look at that came out of one of the 4 horns. Okay, it waxed exceeding great, and we're told that it headed south. It went toward the south, and towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. What do you reckon the pleasant land might be talking about? Do you reckon it might be talking about the land of God, Israel, the promised land? Do you think that's the thing we might think about as a pleasant place, that God intended as a pleasant place?
It says God's eyes continually upon it.
That's right. Okay, so we come back to this map here. The Greek, remember we're talking about the Greek Empire here at the moment? This Seleucid Empire became prominent in the north of the land, and the south was the Ptolemaic Empire. These two. Okay? Once again, Israel in the middle. And sorry for those that are online, you're probably not getting the animations, you'll get it all revealed straight away. Okay, and so we have a king in the north and we have a king in the south, because it's all in a relation to Israel. And out of them came forth a little horn. Now, in that northern empire and that southern empire, over the years there was ongoing conflict. And we're told about that in Daniel, and it's told about it in Daniel chapter 11. And we're not going to go into all the detail of Daniel chapter 11, okay? But it's got this interaction between the king of the north and the king of the south. And we get the impression that the king of the north was quite strong, and we saw that there on the map. Now, there was a man by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was, we've got there, a Greek Hellenistic king who ruled that Seleucid Empire in the north. I'm suggesting to you he is that little horn, okay? And he ruled that empire from 175 to 164 BC. And we're told in Daniel 8 verse 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now we're told about Antiochus Epiphanes, you can read this fairly readily. I think I might have even got this off good old Google, all right, but it was consistent with others, but wherever you get it, that's fine, okay. So focusing here, okay, by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, the place of the sanctuary was cast down. And we're told there that he had a man by the name of Menelaus, which was a puppet high priest as such, who he restored. And Antiochus issued decrees aimed at helping the most enthusiastic pro-Greek faction of the Jews, usually called Hellenizers, because Hellenists were people that wanted to be Greek. Okay, they liked that Greek influence. And they were Hellenizers, and they were against the traditional Jews. And he outlawed Jewish religious rites and traditions. And the temple in Jerusalem was changed to a syncretic Greek Jewish cult that included the worship of Zeus. Okay? By him the daily sacrifice was taken away, the place of the sanctuary was cast down. The Greek historian Diodorus wrote that Antiochus sacrificed a great swine at the image of Moses, and at the altar of God that stood in the outward court had sprinkled them with the blood of the sacrifice. Imagine that, a swine being sacrificed in the temple of God. How would they have felt about that? He commanded likewise that the books by which they were taught and hate all other nations should be sprinkled with the broth made of the swine's flesh, and he put out the lamp called by them immortal, which burns continually in the temple. And lastly, he forced the high priest and other Jews to eat swine's flesh, which was an unclean animal, wasn't it? And so he did everything he could to undermine everything that the Jews should have valued. And so he really does fulfill that picture, doesn't he? And he happened. And he happened, some 500 years or so after Daniel received this message. Okay? And so we have the Roman Empire there. And the focus shifts to Constantinople, because Constantinople is really essentially the area or the country north of Israel, isn't it? Okay, Constantinople, Constantine chose as a strategic place. Okay, probably not clear on this map. There's a waterway through there, the Bosporus, and the Dardanelles just through there, which is, we had a talk about this recently, and I think Brother Steve did the talk, okay, on the First World War. What happened at the Dardanelles in the First World War? Australia was there. Yeah, Gallipoli. Okay, the Anzacs. Okay, this area, extremely strategic. It is the waterway that gets into the Black Sea, okay, which is then the only way out for Russia, Ukraine, Bulgaria, to get their goods out and then to the rest of the world. Okay, extremely strategic. In the days we're talking about, it was equally important because it's where East meets West. Constantinople, or modern-day Istanbul, is, I think, probably the only country that crosses two continents, Asia and Europe. So extremely important from a commercial point of view. And we're going to see that in our talk in the second part. And so the focus really comes over here at this point in time. And we have then the Ottoman Empire developing, which became that empire that ruled in that area at that time until, as we said, that time of the First World War, when it shrank again and Israel once again ended up in the hands of the Jews. And so the Ottoman Empire became really that king of the north, the modern-ish day king of the north, if you like, which has shrunk back at this point in time. Okay? And in Daniel chapter 11, I said we're not going to go into all the detail there, but we do know that in verse 40, it says that at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind. And so the king of the north and the king of the south really talk about regions and where things are going to happen from. And that's what we're going to look at in our second session, where we're going to focus on this area of king of the north and the king of the south and the things that might be happening there. Now that's really all I'm going to deal with in this session, and I hope we haven't gone too fast. Hopefully you've been able to manage to get down those details. Is there any questions before we finish? Anyone totally confused? No. Boy, too polite to say.
Well, he did whisper in my ear.
Yeah.
The young ones know what swine is.
Oh, I presume.
I presume they do, but
Do you know what swine are? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. That was a great, important miracle, wasn't there, with swine? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's good. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, we will sort of deal with that in the second session. Yeah. Yeah.